What's up, Techno fam? Chana D, your Techno Dad here, and in today's video, we are going to be taking a look at the new Pioneer VSX-LX505 AV receiver, and we're going to check it out right after the jump. And I'm back. Now, first things first, before I begin, I want to give a big shout out and thank you to all my patrons on Patreon. You know, I had to buy this AV receiver from Best Buy, so thanks to all of you supporting the channel on Patreon. I can do that kind of thing, you know, save up a couple of months and then buy a piece of gear that I know a lot of you want to know about. And I too want to know about this because this seems like it could dethrone the Denon X3700H for my top recommended AV receiver. So let's check it out. And of course, yes, I know a lot of you are like, well, why didn't you go with the Onkyo RZ50? It's in the same price range, same kind of stats, and you know, Onkyo owns Pioneer. And the main reason was I couldn't get my hands on one. That's pretty much it. Like, they came in October or November for like a week, and then a bunch of people grabbed them, and then they were just sold out. So that's why I got the Pioneer LX505 over the RZ50 Onkyo. The Pioneer LX505 retails for $14.99 and is an AVR that processes 11 channels and powers 9 channels. So out of the box, you can run 5.1.4 or 7.1.2 Dolby Atmos setups. It also has pre-outs for adding external amplifiers for all 11 channels. In the box, we get the usual suspects: remote control, batteries for the remote, calibration microphone, AM and FM antennas, a 2-prong IEC power cable, and some literature. On the front, from left to right, we have an input selector knob, and below that, a power button. In the center, we have a large LCD display with a fold-down flap underneath. Behind the flap, we have a lot of controls for different functions. We've got a radio and presets area, dimmer function, surround sound selector, 3 personal preset buttons, and we have jacks for a 1/4-inch headphone output, calibration mic input, USB port, and the auxiliary HDMI input. And to the right, we have a volume knob. The back panel is laid out nicely. There are 4 analog inputs plus a phono stage for a turntable. There are 2 digital audio inputs, 1 optical and the other coaxial. Right next to that are the antenna inputs. Moving over, we have component and composite video inputs, which are assignable, an RS-232 jack, IR in and out, and 2 trigger outputs. As mentioned before, there is a pre-out section for all 11 channels and zone 2 and 3. However, if you're running 2 sets of height channels, you will have to decide between height 2 and zone 3. Above the pre-out section, we have 11 pairs of binding posts. Depending on your setup, you will have to read what's on the binding posts. The surround back posts are also used for zone 3 or height 2. Along the top, we have 6 HDMI inputs and 2 HDMI outputs. To my knowledge, these are all HDMI 2.1 ports that support 4K 120 and 8K 60. The main HDMI output is also your eARC/ARC port. I got another 2 videos I've already shot that are quick tutorials about how to set up eARC with this receiver and how to set up 4K 120 HDR gaming with the Xbox Series X and the Pioneer LX505. So make sure you subscribe up and hit that bell so you get notified when these videos are released. Also on the top row, we have the Ethernet port, another USB port, and on the far right, the power port. So the first step is to remove the Denon X6700H and slide in the Pioneer LX505 in its place. Alright, so when we turn it on, you get an initial setup, which will walk you through a few things like connecting it to the internet and all that kind of stuff. I jumped out of that and went into the menu to check things out on my own. I kind of like this new user interface. It actually doesn't look that bad. So to get here, you press the home button on the remote, then go to System Setup. Now let's go into Speaker, and now Configuration. Okay, so here's where we can tell the AVR what our system looks like. We've got options for 2.1, 3.1, 4.1, 5.1, 6.1, and 7.1. Then you can specify your height channels. We have these options: front high, top front, top middle, top rear, rear high, Dolby speaker front, and Dolby speaker surround. And of course, if you have two sets of height channels, you select either the front high, top front, Dolby speaker front, and then the rear version for your setup. Unlike the Denon, when you set the configuration to 7.1.4, it doesn't say which channels you need to externally power. After consulting the manual, I know, right? I actually had to RTFM. It looks like you were supposed to externally power the surround back channels. Now, it doesn't look like there's much flexibility here on selecting which speakers you can externally power and which ones can be powered internally by the AVR. It looks like those surround backs need to be externally powered if you want to run 7.1.4. Now, you can run all of the speakers on external power amplifiers if you like, but usually I would, get a 5-channel amplifier and power just the 5 ear level speakers in my 5.1.4 setup. But in this case, you could probably get away with powering the front stage with your 5-channel amplifier, and then you would take the other 2 channels for your surround back. So there's not a whole lot of flexibility, and sometimes it's kind of like that. Like the Anthem MRX720 I have, we had to power the rear heights with an external power amplifier. So some AVRs are built this way, others aren't. I know with the Denon Marantz, you have a little bit of flexibility. It's either the rear height or the front mains, which totally makes sense. One thing that is interesting if you are running external power like I am, you have to go into the menu and assign the trigger to be active per input. So we press the home button again, go into system setup, hardware, 12-volt trigger A, and then select the inputs you want the trigger to be working on. There's also the same options for 12-volt trigger B. You can assign the input, which tells the AVR to turn on the amp for that specific input. So this is kind of a cool feature. I kind of like this. In my setup, I have 2 power amplifiers, one for the ear level speakers and one for the height channels. So if we're watching the DirecTV box, I could just have the 1 power amplifier on, and then when I switch over to like my 4K Blu-ray player, I can have the LX500 turn on the amplifier for the height channels. So that's kind of cool. And you can also do that for like zone 2 or zone 3 if you're running external power for that. So when you pick a specific input, it'll turn on your zone 2. Yeah, pretty cool. Okay, so I know you guys are going to be asking me, how is Dirac Live and how did that sound and all that cool stuff. And I want to let you know I have not gotten into that. This is just the introductory video, unboxing, overview, quick Dolby Atmos setup, walk through some of the menus. I will be getting into Dirac Live in the coming weeks with this AV receiver. I actually had it in place for like about 2.5 days, and then I had to swap out back to the Denon because Joe and Tell was doing a remote manual calibration of my setup, and it's really only possible with that new Denon Marantz app, and it actually sounds pretty amazing. So if you have a Denon and or a Marantz AV receiver, and why would you have a Denon and Marantz? I don't know. If you have a Denon or Marantz, you definitely need to try out the Joe and Tell Magic Beans setup. That's what I jokingly call it, but no, it's actually pretty amazing. I didn't think the system would like gel and be like glued together as it is, and I'll make a full video about that. As far as the Pioneer LX505 goes, so far, so good. So I got my fingers crossed. I really hope I like this AV receiver, especially since I had to buy this. This is like the 5th receiver I have in-house. And I'm curious to see because I've always recommended the Denon X3600H and now the 3700H due to the fact that they have room to grow. It's a 9-channel receiver, so you can run 4 high channels, but you can also run an 11-channel setup. And I would call this the mid-tier AV receiver. I know $1,500 is still a lot of money, and I know that the RZ50 is $1,400, and then the Denon is like $100 more than the Pioneer, so I don't know. I'm hoping that this will be good enough for me to finally like recommend. And oh, by the way, this is my first Pioneer AV receiver, so yeah, I'm still just warming up to it, and I've got a couple of setup videos, so you guys make sure you subscribe up and hit the bell. And if you have any questions about this receiver and there's something specific you want me to check out, let me know down in the comments below. And yeah, I mean, that's about it. So we'll see you next time. Peace.